Good day, children. In video 1 and 2 of Evans Tries an O-Level, you came across Evans, an inmate who is imprisoned in Oxford prison, appearing for an O-Level German exam. And he is personally monitored by the governor of Oxford prison. Reverend Stuart McCleary, a parson, is given the charge to invigilate the exam. The exam, which started 10 minutes late, gets over at 11:25, and Stevens, who got an instruction over the phone, makes sure that he escorts McCleary to the gate from Evans' cell. We will continue with part 3 now. How did he get on, do you think? Asked Stevens as he walked beside McCleary to the main gates. Oh, I can't think he's distinguished himself, I'm afraid. His Scots accent seemed broader than ever, and his long black overcoat, reaching almost to his knees, fostered the illusion that he had suddenly grown slimmer. Stevens felt pleased that the governor had asked him and not Jackson to see McCleary off the premises, and all in all, the morning had gone pretty well. So, as they are walking out, as Stevens is escorting McCleary to the main gates, he checks out how Evans has written his exam. McCleary says that, I can't think he has distinguished himself. And Stevens notices that his Scots accent is broader, and his long black overcoat, reaching almost his knees, gives the illusion that he has become slimmer. So he notices two abnormalities, but he does not act on it because of his inflated ego. An alert police officer would have acted and cleared all his doubts. But Stevens was inflated with a false ego there because the governor had asked him and not the senior prison officer to escort the invigilator to the gate. But something stopped him from making his way directly to the canteen for a belated cup of coffee. He wanted to take just one last look at Evans. It was like a program he had seen on TV about a woman who could never really convince herself that she had locked the front door when she had gone to bed. Often she got up 12, 15, sometimes 20 times to check the bolt. So now that his work was over and he had to go to the canteen for a cup of coffee which he usually took earlier, but he decides that once again he will just go check on Evans. He felt like he was like a character in a program that he had seen on TV, a woman who kept checking her front door sometimes 12, 15 and 20 times to check whether she had bolted the door. Now he felt like that person because he once again went to check on Evans. The whole morning for the past 2 to 3 hours he had been checking on Evans through the peephole. He re-entered D wing, made his way along to Evans' cell and opened the peephole once more. Oh no, Christ, no! There, sprawled back in Evans' chair, was a man. For a semi-second, Stevens thought it must be Evans. A grey regulation blanket slipping from his shoulders, the front of his closely cropped, irregularly tufted hair awash with fierce red blood which had dripped already through the small black beard, and even now spreading horribly over the white clerical collar and down into the black clerical front. So he enters D wing and goes and once again opens the peephole to look at Evans, and he finds there, sprawled on the chair, was a person who looked like Evans because a regulation blanket was covering him. And then he looks at the closely cropped hair, the thick hair, which was soaked with blood. And this blood was coming down and had washed through the beard and was now spreading over the collar, the priest's collar, and to the cassock of the priest. So then he immediately assumes that this is not Evans. For a second he had earlier thought that it was Evans because the regulation blanket was wrapped, but now seeing the cassock of a priest, he realizes that this is not Evans, this is McCleary the invigilator. Stevens shouted wildly for Jackson, and the words appeared to penetrate the curtain of blood that veiled McCleary's ears. For the minister's hand fell feebly for a handkerchief from his pocket and held it to his bleeding head, the blood seeping slowly through the white linen. He gave a long, low moan and tried to speak, but his voice trailed away, and by the time Jackson had arrived and dispatched Stevens to ring the police and the ambulance, the handkerchief was a sticky, squelchy wad of cloth. So Stephen now shouted for Jackson, and as he was shouting, McCleary woke up, and then the minister felt for his handkerchief from his pocket in order to cover his bleeding head. And then he covered it, and soon the handkerchief too was soaked with blood. He was trying to speak, but the voice turned into a moan. So as soon as Jackson came, he sent Stevens to call the police and also ring for the ambulance. And by then, the handkerchief was wet, soaked completely with blood. McCleary slowly raised himself, his face twisted tightly with pain. "Don't worry about the ambulance, man. I'm all right. I'm all right. Get the police. I know where he..." He closed his eyes, and another drip of blood splashed like a huge red raindrop on the wooden floor. His hand felt along the table, found the German question paper, and grasped it tightly in his blood-stained hand. "Get the governor. I know where Evans." So as soon as McCleary regained consciousness, he was saying not to worry about the ambulance. He said that he was completely all right. And as he closed his eyes, there was another drop of blood that splashed from his head to the wooden floor. He held on to the table for support, and then he took the question paper, the German question paper which Evans had used, and he said, "Call the governor. I know where Evans would have gone." Almost immediately, sirens were sounding, prison officers barked orders, puzzled prisoners pushed their way along the corridors, doors were banged and bolted, and phones were ringing everywhere. And within a minute, McCleary, with Jackson and Stevens supporting him on either side, his face now streaked and caked with drying blood, was greeted in the prison yard by the governor, perplexed and grim. So there was total mayhem in Oxford prison now because a prisoner had escaped. All the prisoners were asked to immediately get inside, and all the doors were being closed. So total chaos was prevailing in Oxford prison. Phones were ringing everywhere, and McCleary, supported by Jackson and Stevens, was taken to the prison yard where the governor was waiting. The governor looked shocked and very serious. "We must get you to hospital immediately. I just don't..." "You have called the police?" Yes, they are on their way, but..." I'm all right. Look here." Awkwardly, he opened the German question paper and thrust it before the governor's face. "It's there. Do you see what I mean?" The governor looked down and realized what McCleary was trying to tell him. A photocopied sheet had been carefully and cleverly superimposed over the last, originally blank page of the question paper. So, governor says that McCleary has to be taken to the hospital, and then at the same time he wonders, he does not know what has actually happened there. McCleary questions whether they have called the police. Governor says yes, they are on the way. McCleary again reasserts that he is perfectly all right, and then he shows them the German question paper, and they all look and they realize that there is another photocopied sheet has been cleverly stuck onto the last originally blank sheet of the question paper, where a few instructions have been given to the prisoner how to escape. "You see what they have done, Governor? You see?" His voice trailed off again as the governor, dredging the layers of long neglected learning, willed himself to translate the German text before him. There was something written in German on that sheet, and then he tries to translate with great effort. "You must follow the plan already something. The vital point in time is 3 minutes before the end of the examination, but something. He can't understand what it is written. Don't hit him too hard, remember? He is a minister, and don't overdo the Scots accent when." So McCleary points out to governor what has been written there. Governor reads it. He has forgotten his German, but still he tries, and then he's able to read something from that. And then he realizes that that is an instruction given to Evans. Tells him that the vital time, the most important time, is 3 minutes before the end of the examination, and that is when all the action takes place, and not to hit the invigilator too hard, and not to overdo the Scots accent. A fast approaching siren wailed to its crescendo. The great doors of the prison yard were pushed back, and a white police car squealed to a jerky halt beside them. Detective Superintendent Carter swung himself out of the passenger seat and saluted the governor. "What the hell's happening, sir?" And turning to McCleary, "Christ, who's hit him?" So then they hear a siren which reaches its peak as it reaches the gates of the prison. And the prison gate is opened, and a white car comes to a halt with a lot of noise in front of them. And out of the car comes Detective Superintendent Carter, and he salutes the governor and asks him what has actually happened. And then he looks at McCleary, who's bleeding right now, and says and swears and says, "Who's hit him?" But McCleary cut across whatever explanation the governor might have given. "Elsfield Way, officer. I know where Evans." He was breathing heavily and leaned for support against the side of the car, where the imprint of his hand was left in tarnished crimson. In bewilderment, Carter looked to the governor for guidance. "What?" "Take him with you if you think he'll be all right. He's the only one who seems to know what is happening." Carter opened the back door and helped McCleary inside, and within a few seconds, the car leaped away in a spurt of gravel. So now he asks what has happened to McCleary. Without allowing the governor to give a reply, McCleary interrupts and says, "Elsfield Way, officer." He says that Evans might have escaped through Elsfield Way. He says that he knows where Evans has. He seems to be breathing very heavily, and he takes support of the car to hold himself. And then when he holds on to the car, it leaves a red imprint because of his bloody hands. Carter does not know what is happening. He looks at the governor for guidance. Governor says, "Take him with you. Take McCleary with you, because he's the only one who seems to know what is actually happening." Now, governor is completely baffled and blindly trusts everything that is being told by McCleary. As the governor, as the head of that prison, he should have tried to find out what actually was happening, but instead he is too baffled, too perplexed, and decides to fall upon McCleary for guidance there. Elsfield Way. Now McCleary gets into the car, and then Carter drives away from there, depending completely on McCleary for guidance now. "Elsfield Way," McCleary had said, and there it was, staring up at the governor from the last few lines of the German text. Now, after the car leaves, governor looks at the question paper. To understand how McCleary came to the conclusion that Evans has gone to Elsfield, and he sees what is written there. "Elsfield Way," McCleary had said, and there it was, staring up at the governor from the last few lines of the German text. "From Elsfield Way, drive to Headington roundabout, where, yes, of course, the examination board was in Elsfield Way, and someone from the board must have been involved in the escape plan from the very beginning. The question paper itself, the correction slip." So that is how McCleary came to the conclusion. There was clear instruction given there: from Elsfield Way, drive to Headington roundabout, where, yes, of course. And then governor comes to the conclusion, yes, somebody from the examination board has helped Evans. That is why another sheet has been cleverly stuck on the last blank page of the question paper. So Evans must have escaped into the route of where the examination board was situated. So that is the conclusion governor comes to. The governor turned to Jackson and Stevens. "I don't need to tell you what's happened, do I?" His voice sounded almost calm in its scathing contempt. "And which one of you two morons was it who took Evans for a nice little walk to the main gates and waved him bye-bye?" "It was me, sir," stammered Stevens. "Just like you told me, sir. I could have sworn." "What? Just like I told you, you say? What the hell?" "When you rang, sir, and told me to." "When was that?" The governor's voice was a whiplash now. "You know, sir, about 20 past 11, just before." "You blithering idiot, man. It wasn't me who rang you. Don't you realize?" But what was the use? He had used the telephone at that time, but only to try unsuccessfully once more to get through to the examinations board. So after having come to the conclusion that Evans must have gone through Elsfield, he now looks at the two people for whom he had given the charge of taking care of the examination. He's very angry, he's highly critical, and he's filled with scorn when he looks at both his police officers. And he checks out who had taken Evans to the gate. Stevens says that it was him as instructed by the governor over the phone. Governor says that he has not given any instruction. They realize that somebody had mimicked the voice of governor and had given the instruction to Stevens to accompany McCleary to the gate. In fact, they feel that it was Evans who had walked out of the gate disguised as McCleary. Stevens reasserts that it was the governor and the call came 20 minutes past 11. Governor is very angry with him and says that he had never used the phone for this purpose to call Stevens. In fact, he had used the phone only to check whether the call was from the examinations board. He shook his head in growing despair and turned on the senior prison officer. As for you, Jackson, how long have you been pretending you've got a brain, huh? Well, I'll tell you something, Jackson. Your skull is empty. Absolutely empty. It was Jackson who had spent 2 hours in Evans' cell the previous evening, and it was Jackson who had confidently reported that there was nothing hidden away there. Nothing at all. And yet, Evans had somehow managed to conceal not only a false beard, a pair of spectacles, a dog collar, and all the rest of his clerical paraphernalia, but also some sort of weapon with which he had given McCleary such a terrible blow across the head. Now his anger turns to the senior prison officer, Jackson, and tells Jackson that his skull is empty. He does not own a brain. Because it was Jackson who had gone through the cell of Evans and checked everything. He had confiscated anything that could be harmful, and now they were wondering how Evans had managed to hide a false beard, a pair of spectacles, the collar of the priest, and also a cassock of a priest, the dress of a priest. And also he had something very harmful there with which he had hit McCleary on the head. A prison van backed alongside, but the governor made no immediate move. He looked down again at the last line of the German, to the Headington roundabout, where you go straight over and make your way to New Graben. New Graben, where on earth? New something, New Grave, never heard of it. There was a war grave, something near Reading, but no, it was probably a code word. And then it hit him. Newbury. God, yes, Newbury was a pretty big sort of place. So he continues reading the instruction and try to decode it. And then he sees that the instruction continues. He's been asked to go to the Headington roundabout, and from there he has to go to New Graben. So there's no place called New Graben. He wonders which is this place which is used as a code to describe. So he translates it. It's a German word, New Graben. He realizes Graben means to dig. And then he wonders which could be the place. So it has to be something related to dig. So it has to be translated and it has to be decoded. So he keeps thinking, and then he thinks of various words, new grave, war grave, and then suddenly it strikes him. It has to be Newbury. Bury is related to dig. And so he comes to the conclusion it has to be Newbury, and it is a very big place where it is possible for Evans to hide. He rapped out his orders to the driver. St. Aldate's police station and step on it. Take Jackson and Stevens here. And when you get there, ask for Bell. Chief Inspector Bell. Got that? He leaped the stairs to his office 3 at a time, got Bell on the phone immediately and put the facts before him. We will get him, sir, said Bell. We will get him with a bit of luck. Now, he instructs the driver to take Stevens and Jackson to St. Aldate's police station, and he calls the chief inspector of St. Aldate's police station, Mr. Bell, and immediately tells what has happened in this prison. Bell assures him that soon they would arrest Evans. The governor sat back and lit a cigarette. Ye gods, what a beautifully laid plan it had all been. What a clever fellow Evans was. Careless, leaving that question paper behind, but then they all made their mistakes somewhere along the line. Well, almost all of them. And that is why, very, very shortly, Mr. Clever Evans would be back inside doing his once more. So having called Mr. Bell, He sits down there and he realizes that Evans is indeed very clever. He had done a clever planning and escaped very cleverly. But he thinks that it was foolish of him to leave behind the question paper, because they could come to a conclusion, they could find out where Evans has escaped through the question paper, and soon he believes with conviction that they will arrest Evans because of the mistake he made. The phone on his desk erupted in a strident burst, and Superintendent Carter informed him that McCleary had spotted Evans driving off along Elsfield Way. They had got the number of the car all right and had given chase immediately, but had lost him at the Headington roundabout. He must have doubled back into the city. No, said the governor quietly. No, he is on his way to Newbury. He explained his reasons for believing so and left it at that. It was a police job now, not his. He was just another good for a giggle, gullible governor. That was all. So the phone rings and the governor picks it. It was Superintendent Carter who had gone with McCleary. So he tells him that McCleary had seen Evans driving off along the route of Elsfield Way. They had taken down the number of the car and they had chased it, but they had lost the car at Headington roundabout. Governor tells, no, he is not going in the Elsfield Way. In fact, he is going to Newbury. That is the conclusion that he has come to now. He explains that, and then he thinks that now it is a police job. He is only the head of the prison. Now it is the investigating officer's job to see where he has gone and to arrest him. Now he would be called good for a giggle, gullible. Gullible means one who can be easily tricked governor. That is how everybody around him would call him. He would be mocked at for letting Evans escape. Once again, he has been humiliated because Evans has escaped from the jail. By the way, Carter, I hope you managed to get McCleary to the hospital all right? Yes, he is in the Radcliffe now, really groggy he was when he got to the examinations office, and they rang for the ambulance from there. The governor rang the Radcliffe a few minutes later and asked for the accident department. McCleary, you say? Yes, he is a parson. I don't think there's anyone. Yes, there is. You will find one of your ambulances picked him up from Elsfield Way about. Oh, that? Yes, we sent an ambulance all right. But when we got there, the fellow had gone. No one seemed to know where he was. Just vanished. Not a sign. But the governor was no longer listening, and the truth seemed to hit him with an almost physical impact somewhere in the back of his neck. So now the talk with Carter continues. Governor checks out with Carter whether McCleary, who was badly injured, has been taken to the hospital. Carter says that he has dropped him. He's being taken to Radcliffe Hospital. He says he is in the Radcliffe Hospital and he was very weak and he was unable to walk. He was when we got to the examination office, and from the examinations office they had called for an ambulance from Radcliffe Hospital. Now, having kept the phone, now governor calls the Radcliffe Hospital to check on the condition of McCleary and then asks for the accident department. So the receptionist there says, McCleary? Governor says, yes, he is a priest. The receptionist says, no, I don't think there is anyone. Governor says, yes, one of your ambulances picked him up from the examinations board. Oh, that. So the person says, yes, we had sent an ambulance, but when the ambulance reached there was nobody there. And then the governor realizes what has actually happened. And then the truth hit him with almost a physical impact. He realizes what has actually happened. A quarter of an hour later, they found the Reverend S. McCleary securely bound and gagged in his study in Broad Street. He had been there, he said, since 8:15 a.m. when the two men had called. Enquiries in Newbury throughout the afternoon produced nothing at all. And by tea time, everyone in the prison knew what had happened. It had not been Evans impersonating McCleary who had walked out. It had been Evans impersonating McCleary who had stayed in. So now the governor comes to the conclusion. He realizes that it was Evans who had actually stayed back and pretended to be McCleary. They come to the conclusion when governor immediately sends a search party to Reverend McCleary's house and finds that the actual Reverend McCleary never left the flat. It was somebody else, Ivan's friend, who had disguised himself as a parson and had come to invigilate the exam. The original McCleary was tied up in his flat. And he said that he had never left the flat. He had been there since 8:15 a.m. when two people had come there and they had hit him and they had tied him and gagged him, and one person had taken the place of McCleary and had left the flat and come to Oxford prison. So the person who had come in to invigilate was actually Ivan's friend. And then they realized that it was all an act between the disguised McCleary and Evans, and it was actually Evans who had stayed back as McCleary, and it was McCleary, the disguised McCleary, the invigilator, who had walked out. So now they know that they have been fooled by Evans and his friend. We will deal with the remaining lesson in part 4. Thank you, children.